So Spider-Man Far From Home has hit theaters. That means it's time to talk spoilers. You have been warned. Let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. If you're used to my channel but new to my spoiler reviews, they're more podcast style. I just kind of let her rip. They're a little bit more relaxed, kind of allow myself to kind of go wherever it leads without all the quick editing and everything like that. So you get to see my personality more, and you get a whole lot more of my opinions. If you enjoyed this video, just so you know, I put out a video earlier today about 8 canceled Spider-Man movies. I would love it if you would check out that video. I spent a lot of time working on it, and I hope you guys enjoy it. With that said, I'm going to go through this in my normal review style, the good, the mixed, the bad, and I literally am using my outline from my non-spoiler review, and now you know exactly what I was talking about in that one. And let's get started talking about the good. And the first thing I talked about before is that I love the way that this movie bridged the gap between Endgame and Spider-Man Far From Home. There had been rumors, they had been, like, they always try and mislead in their marketing and stuff like that. So they had kind of claimed that Far From Home took place immediately after Endgame at some point in time. That's not true. Months and months have passed. And this movie finds a way to just kind of fill in all the information you need very efficiently by using the news broadcast that they established in the previous film and using that as a way to be like, hey, let's use this as a mechanism to kind of like recap the year for them. But in doing so, we're actually helping the audience understand exactly what happened. I know a lot of people have kind of been messaging me. So did people jump forward in the time? Did they go backward in time? How exactly did this work? The first 5 minutes of this movie, when they do that little news deal, they explain it perfectly. The way that people jump forward, and then they went, if you hadn't thought about it, that means in some cases, younger siblings are now older siblings. And then likewise, one thing that we didn't really see in Endgame was what it was like when people returned, for the obvious fact that it's very silly looking when people suddenly appear. And this movie used that to great effect of like, they play the blip happening for a joke in the movie at this kind of basketball game, and then they followed up with another punchline of like people showing up in the middle of it and falling over, and suddenly this gigantic traumatic event turns into a really funny punchline, which I thought was really nicely handled, what they were able to do with that. But it was also just really efficient as a mechanism to fill in the gaps on what could be a complex sort of thing to explain about how the world changed, and they made it really clear. We kind of pick up, and they have shortly after this, we gotta go to that nighttime little event that Aunt May's throwing in Spider-Man's at it, and once again, this efficiently lets you know the sorts of things that would have happened, which is to say, if half the population disappeared, some houses are suddenly empty. And so people show up at the houses, and people would move in and all sorts of stuff would happen. And so what happens when people come back? And that's just really smart filmmaking, the way that they were able to kind of fill in the gaps on all of that. From there, this movie's really funny. I alluded to that just now, that they were able to turn Thanos' snap into the punchline of a joke, but the whole movie is really funny. And I'll actually, when I get into the negatives, I'll actually touch on it because it might be a little bit too funny. But, I mean, they just go for every laugh. They find scenarios to take. You take Nick Fury's seriousness and how everything is like life or death, where the mission is all that matters, contrasting that with immature teenager stuff and like people constantly walking into the room. It's just so many funny opportunities. Or the Flash stuff where you get punched in the balls. You have slapstick stuff with the teacher dropping his camera in the water. I mean, they just go for every single joke, and some of them are cheap jokes. Like as soon as you see the teacher with the camera, you're like, okay, it's gonna fall in the water. So some of them are pretty obvious. Of course, getting punched in the balls is just a cheap joke that you can do at any point in time. It doesn't take brains to write that. But other stuff was just set up really nicely to have payoffs that actually work, that are funny inside of it. Like I said, the stuff about making a joke out of Thanos' snap, that's just smart. That's really clever writing. That's informative, which is the best type of writing when it serves the plot as well as informing people how things played out, as well as making you laugh out loud. And the whole kind of movie does stuff like this. And whatever you might find funny, everyone has different ways they're funny. This movie goes for so many attempts at humor that something's gonna make you laugh inside of this film. And also because there's so much humor, even if I had some issues with the plot, and we'll get into the specifics on that, I was never bored. And I've seen it twice. And while I was watching it the second time, I was thinking to myself, oh, I can't wait to see it a third time because my wife and kids haven't seen it yet. And they love, my kids love Far From Homecoming. And so then I think we're going to go do that on the 4th of July. But yeah, so, it's that type of movie that even if, for all my problems, it's very rewatchable, just like Homecoming was. So much entertainment value just from the fact that it's a comedy. It works really well on that level. From there's also some really cool action inside of the movie. And early on, the first big action sequence, the trenches with the water elemental, and you have these buildings collapsing, and they just do some stuff with Spider-Man. The whole movie does stuff like this, where Spider-Man just very cleverly is like spinning loops through windows to like tie things, the way that what you would do with a rope to catch things, except he's acrobatic, so he can just like flip himself over. Just really cool shots like that. And then some of the best slapstick in the entire MCU when he's trying to like hold the building up and he keeps hitting his head on the bell tower, back to the comedy side of things. Just like a nice 1-2 of something that would have happened in the scenario, but it's just funny to put it there. But just really nice Spider-Man type choreography shot in a way. The CGI's gotten to the point in time where it's just like, all right, that looks like Spider-Man is right there in front of me saving this building that's blowing up. And then, of course, as you progress through the film, what I couldn't talk about in my previous review was one of the standout things, the Mysterio dream illusion sequence type stuff. Very cool. And it really does feel like dreamlike because it just transitions from one thing to the next. And the cleverness of like Spider-Man goes to throw a punch and there's nothing in front of him, but then he hits a wall in the process, and it's just very cool visualization. Or he falls down and you see this big gap in front of him and then suddenly he's on the ground. That's inventive, clever action. Because, we've seen Spider-Man swinging through buildings. We've seen superheroes punching people in the face. We've seen ray beams, 100 times before. When you find something we haven't seen before, that's really cool. And I wish we could have gotten more, because it seemed like the fight sequence after Peter's trying to tell Nick Fury and there's the fake Nick Fury death, all that stuff, that one seemed to be the best use of the Mysterio type stuff. And then there's a little bit of it in the finale, and there's of course all sorts of other things in the finale, but the really cool stuff was pretty limited. I wish they could have crafted a way to have more of that stuff in the finale inside of it. But each action sequence seemed to have something distinct about it. And that's good to have when you're doing a big action movie. I think, was there 4 big action sequences? Because you have water elemental, fire elemental, Mysterio fight, and then the climax, I think, are the big 4 inside of it. And each one of those has a distinct thing about it that makes it memorable, that stands out, distinct ways that it's funny, distinct ways that they're emotional in their own way. So I thought that worked really nicely. From there, we'll move on to kind of talking about some characters inside of it. Nick Fury, or Talos, as it turns out to be, I was just really nicely used. As I was watching it the first time, I was thinking the performance was weird, because he's not normal Nick Fury. Like, he's cranky Nick Fury, and he's funny Nick Fury, but also seems a little bit sluggish, less like the least energetic Samuel L. Jackson we've ever seen in one of these movies. And I was like, what's kind of going on? Like, this is weird, because he's not bad. He's really interesting and has a nice dynamic, and played for comedy really well inside of it without cheapening the character, like scratching his eye out by a cat. And then at the end reveal, it all made sense. Like, rewatching it the second time, like, okay, he should be different. He should be doing Nick Fury type things that aren't quite right. And that's what it was, because it wasn't actually him. It was someone doing their impersonation of him, in which case it was a nice touch, and it improved the movie. The plot twist in the post-credit scene made the movie better inside of that. But just a nice use of a character, and as it turns out, a different character as it actually was. Happy Hogan was another one that was a very pleasant, I wouldn't say surprise, because he was obviously on the trailer, and the trailer's made clear. So it was nice that Happy Hogan got to be the hero in a very Happy Hogan type way. They didn't suddenly try and turn him into something he's not. They've always had him as the guy that is willing to get in on the action, but he's not actually good at it. So once again, another great, amazing joke where he picks up, I'll use this as the shield, he picks up a shield to try to throw it like Captain America, and you just see it fall underneath the drone. Just such a great little funny moment inside of the film. But all of it, while getting a laugh and showing he's not the hero, he's the hero that he is. Because he's the mentor that he needs to be. He's the person that he needs to be to Peter. He's willing to step in to try and help the kids. And all the stuff that he would do, he does it. While also not being an actual superhero in the process. But the way they evolve the relationship between Peter and Happy is also really nice. Because it feels earned. It feels right. It doesn't feel like, why is Happy suddenly behaving differently? No. Both of them just had something really dramatic happen to them, something traumatic happen to them, related to the person that kind of brought them together, in which the dynamic between the two of them would change a good bit. And you see that in this film, and I thought it was really nice stuff. And I love Jon Favreau as an actor, as a writer, and as a director. I'm a big fan of his. And so anytime he gets to kind of be in the spotlight, that I enjoy that. And he seems to know his place really well in some of these side role type things, that how to best use his skills. And absolutely, he was great here. Of course, you got to talk about Tom Holland, and just he keeps kind of growing into this one. This one, I think, gave him a little bit more, especially the second half of the film, sad Peter Parker, and just really, as his own mistakes, the loss of Tony, realizing Tony's gone and I don't know what to do. Powerful stuff in so much of what he does inside of this film. And of course, he can pull off the funny lines. He can play awkward. That was one thing he did really well in this movie. He played the awkward well. And all the teenagers, there's ups and downs about, his friends and everything, and how if it gets too kiddie at certain points in time. But the good side to it is that they actually kind of capture the weirdness of teenagers, the awkwardness of their relationships and first kisses and the stupid summer flings. And I know some people weren't crazy about the little romance inside of it with his friend and the news anchor girl. I worked with teenagers for 10 years, and that crap happens all the time. And it's just, some of it, it reminded me of too many things I've actually seen of, really? You're back together for a trip, and that, falling in love and then break up. I mean, I've just seen all this stuff play out. And so they did the awkwardness of teenagers so well. And then finally, on these ones, you got to talk about Jake Gyllenhaal. Watching it a second time, I liked his performance even a whole lot more. He really does have a magic on screen and can play so many different things so well. And you just buy into the mentor moments and the little lines he throws in, the little sense of humor, can I be honest with you? The glasses look stupid. He can pull off all these lines, and then you can turn it around, and he can be just such a jerk that you really kind of believe, he doesn't want to kill Peter Parker. He feels pretty bad about killing Peter Parker, but he's a guy that believes in what he's doing. So I thought it absolutely was great casting, great in the part. And I didn't talk about some of this in my regular review, and I can talk about it a lot more here, but especially watching it the second time, I really enjoyed a lot of the characterization of Mysterio and the way that he was used and the way that he manipulated people. And part of what makes his character so kind of interesting in the second half of the film is that there's this concept of people just want to believe something, and so they'll believe anything. And Mysterio's using that against people, and there might be a little slight allusions to stuff going on in current society, but even more so, it's kind of poking a little bit of fun at the comic book genre of they just come up with this ludicrous plot line, put it in the trailer for the movie, and we bought it. We're like, oh, there's going to be a multiverse, and there's these elementals, and if you do this, and for the first half of the movie, we're buying it. And then he goes, this is a stupid plot line. It's like, wait, is Mysterio the villain making fun of me for believing in your movie? Is that what's going on here? And that's a little bit what's going on there. And I thought that was kind of nice that the movie can poke a little bit of fun at the genre. So much of the writing inside of MCU films, they're making fun of their own writing and their own audience in a way that all celebrating it at the same time, having fun with it. And I thought that was really well done. I still have my problems with the Mysterio character, which we'll get to in the bad side. But there's a lot of things about him that are really well done. I think his personality, his gimmicks, the way they used his mirages and stuff, all that stuff, I think was really nicely handled, and some smart stuff, especially as you go into the second half of the film. And final positive I want to talk about here, I'm sure I'll loop back around as I talk about negatives. I'll remember more positives. These are two of the best post-credit scenes and mid-credit scenes we've had in the MCU. Because a lot of the times when there's two or more, they're joke ones. They're just, one is serious and then the one is jokes, or they're just teasing something. Both of these ones are like, what just happened? Like, what are you saying to me right now? And so our first one, you're watching it, and it's footage that was in the trailers. I was pretty shocked that they put footage from the post-credit scene inside of the trailers, but you see he swings with MJ, they land, and then this nude broadcast, that'd be something totally different, news broadcast starts playing, and I mean, it kind of does this huge turn the world upside down reveal that they're setting up the people turning on Spider-Man going into this next film, and kind of the unrest inside of this world that people don't know what to believe anymore, and the final illusion of Mysterio, his final deception inside of this. And okay, this new news broadcast, this is really cool. And then you get the reveal, J.K. Simmons returning as J. Jonah Jameson, which for years I've heard, John Campea and many others have said things like, you don't want to confuse people by bringing back people from other universes. But if there's one time you could do it and no one would complain, J.K. Simmons is J. Jonah Jameson, you could do it, and they did it. They actually brought him back, and just both times I saw the movie, the theater just like erupted in applause, yelling, just excitement noises, so much so that you couldn't hear the lines. Both times I couldn't really hear what he was saying because people are getting so worked up in the noise. And that's reveal number one, which in and of itself would be like, this is one of the best post-credit scenes we've ever had, followed by Mysterio reveals his identity, which I don't know where they're going with that. I don't know how that's going to play out. I have some frustrations with that will tie into my negatives. But once again, an actual important turn the world upside down plot device of like, whoa, what just happened? Then we get to our second post-credit scene that has equally big turn the world upside down reveal that throughout the whole movie we were watching Skrull. These are totally different characters, and there was a little line in the middle of the movie about the Skrull and their secret bases everywhere, and then so they planted a little bit of seeds for this big reveal. And you're going, okay, what does this mean? That we are saying that Skrull have been in these movies, or are out there, and sometimes they're just turning things all around. And then in the second big reveal that Nick Fury's on a mission where he's on vacation. So he's working with them. He's trying to help them, inform them. But exactly what's going on, not quite entirely sure what it is, except he's like off in space somewhere or something like that with their technology. So I don't even know all of the implications of what they could be saying there. But big reveal of it wasn't Nick Fury all along. With that said, I'm going to move on to the mixed. And when it comes to the mixed, the big things that comes to mind is that this movie to me feels like Spider-Man inside of a high school MCU film, more so than Spider-Man in a Spider-Man film. It feels like the MCU. He feels like Spider-Man. These feel like Spider-Man type people that he would know, but it doesn't feel like we're watching a Spider-Man movie. And what I mean by that is there's just certain traditional Spider-Man type things that they just seem to be heavily trying to stay away from with this franchise, both Homecoming and this film. He's not doing a lot of swinging around New York City. J. Jonah Jameson just shows up now very late in the game. And he's not working with the Daily Bugle. He's not a photographer. There's a bunch of things that are like iconic Spider-Man stuff. And that they did before. They played them pretty heavily, or even Uncle Ben type stuff. It's like they went, okay, Spider-Man, those Spider-Man essentials were done so well or so memorably in Sam Raimi's films, and then it seemed like they tried to do them again in Andrew Garfield films, that we don't want to do that. We don't want to feel like what the Andrew Garfield films felt like, which is like, we're doing this again, so we're not going to do any of that. We want to be true to the spirit of Spider-Man, but have him do totally different stuff. which, you know, I can respect it. Or in the Osborns, Harry Osborn, that like things like that, Oscorp, that should be essential, normally are essential, they're not there. And so much so that we're going to Washington, D.C., we're going to Europe, we're doing a road trip movie in Europe, so it's with spy elements, so it feels like this movie I grew up watching called If Looks Could Kill, and it feels so much like other things, but it doesn't feel like Spider-Man, though he feels like Spider-Man. So that doesn't make it a bad movie. It doesn't mean it's not enjoyable. It doesn't mean it's not interesting. It doesn't inherently make it bad. That's why it's in the mixed section. But at the same time, it makes me go, okay, at the end of this one, we reveal, everyone finds out who he is. And, okay, so the whole world's about to be turned upside down, in which case there's not even a scenario where we can do a classic Spider-Man story of Peter Parker trying to balance his life of being normal guy and Spider-Man at the same time while swinging around in New York City. You can't even do that now because they just turned the whole thing upside down. And it feels like I feel like I want to see that. Not that it just has to be that, not that I want every movie to be that. I very much appreciated the detour with Homecoming. And then we've had a second one and they just turned that, turn things upside down at the end and going, okay, we'll never get that. So there's a sense of loss there for me. Add to that the other stuff about this one that just makes it feel more MCU, where everyone's a comedian. Tony Stark, tech everywhere. Nick Fury is heavily involved in this one. Tony Stark was heavily involved in the last one. Just so many things that make it feel like big MCU film and not as much friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, even though they keep using the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man language. So, doesn't mean it's bad, doesn't mean that you shouldn't like it, but for me, I had a sense of opportunity costs is the word I'll use. The sense of, because I got this, I didn't get this other thing that I would like to get. So, moving on my mixed on these ones. So, before what I said is like I said, I don't want them to keep heading down this path. Like, I want to see the classic version of this. And I just don't know that we can. So anyway, I was repeating myself a little bit. I just saw some notes there that I thought were new things, but they didn't actually turn out to be new things. I say in here the villain situation is mixed. I talked about this a little bit. Jake Gyllenhaal's great. The powers of Mysterio I thought were great. Where I think the villain lost me both times is that in the backstory where they do the big reveal of look that they're actually people angry about Stark, and then they actually show you people that were in previous films. Look, they've come back. Like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then inserting Jake Gyllenhaal into Civil War, that's pretty cool. A bunch of things like that I thought were nice little touches. And tying it together. I love that stuff where some of the technology that you saw in some of these other films, and you go, that's incredible technology. They could use that for more. And the villain has it now, so he's using it for more. That's smart. That's really smart type stuff to do. The gap, though, for me, is they went, all right, disgruntled employees that are jealous, that don't think a kid should have this, therefore they're doing this big scheme. Okay, I'm tracking with you. Their specific scheme about using the zeitgeist of the time, the people's vibe that they need something to believe in, the confusion after these world-ending events, and then our heroes that saved the world seem to have split up. Some of them are gone. Who are our heroes now when the next invasion comes? Using that, I mean, it's smart. But they have like a scene in the movie where it's like, all right, we're going to go to London and we're going to do this and we have to do a citywide thing. And they're like, aren't a lot of people going to die if you do this? And he's like, oh yeah, a lot of people got to die, but that's what happens if I'm going to be a big superhero. Okay, but you went from your disgruntled employee that you don't think a kid should have this tech to I'm okay with a bunch of people dying so that people will think I'm a superhero. There's a big gap there that he's a disgruntled employee, doesn't fill the gap. Doesn't make sense of like, whoa, we went from like, I'm kind of mad to kill a bunch of people I don't know very quickly. And even what's the end game here of I will be the world's greatest superhero, though I'm not a superhero, I don't even understand exactly what the end game is on this plan. And so it's like one of those ones of I almost thought Mysterio was great, but not quite, because such a pivotal piece of that motivation to get to the place that they take him is missing. And it like they could have filled in his his end game a little bit better of how he was going to be the right person to lead them, or why he'd be the right person to do that. And so this idea of like, if we're or maybe more of a belief in what he's doing of like, I'm actually going to save the world. There's chaos. They need someone to be the hero to kind of pull things together. It's not going to be this kid. It's not going to be crazy Nick Fury. So the delusion is I can save the world by being the hero. They leaned more into jealous type stuff, and they didn't put the right motivation to like justify the cost of putting him in this position. So that was kind of knocked him back for me. With that, and I talked about it a little bit. There's a lot of stuff. The deception in the marketing. There's a number of things in the marketing that are not in the movie. They show Iron Spider fighting, and then joking with some police. Not in the movie. A bunch of, I think, some of the dialogue when they first meet Mysterio, I think there's some stuff that they go back and forth on that's not in the movie. I don't remember. So I don't remember. As I'm watching the movie, I can remember, but I can't pull it off at this particular moment. I think there's just more shots of him traveling, and the way the travel process went, I think, was missing. But just a lot of stuff that I don't know if that was, they shot things just to mislead, or they added lines of dialogue in to lean heavier into it's a multiverse to trick the audience. And how much of it was just like, let's put some action sequences in this thing just to make people not able to guess where this thing's headed. I don't know. But they definitely had some deceptions. And then with all the deceptions and things they kept secret, it was weird that the MJ knows who Peter Parker is reveal is in the trailer. They could have like teased that she known, but like they actually like reveal it, and you're like, oh, is that going to be a multiverse thing? Is that going to be like, what's that going to? No, she just knows. Of all the things to put in the trailer, of all the interactions between the two of them that they could have teased, why would you put the actual reveal in this? I thought that was kind of weird. But speaking of MJ, she's another example of, we have an MJ, but it's not actually MJ. It's like, so it's like they're very odd thing to like, MJ is a very distinct person. Mary J, she's like, there's a distinct personality that's not this character, but they're calling him her MJ and treating her like the MJ. Once again, not the traditional take on the character. And with that said, let's move on to the bad. And when it comes to the bad, there's kind of really two categories of where I have issues. The first one is that the movie, it's not just that the movie's funny, because that it's funny is a good thing, but it's written like an actual comedy. And then the second one is the glasses plot line. And there's a little bit of even overlap between my issues of these two. And so to start off with it's written like a comedy. And when I phrased this before, I hadn't quite figured out what exactly it was that bothered me about the way the movie was made. And it felt like it was just kind of like trying to do very wildly different things of be really, really funny, and then at the same time be very serious about other aspects and big plot twists and type things. And I don't think that the pieces quite fit together quite right. And the reason I think it felt off to me is it's not that it's funny, because I'm all for funny, and funny is a positive. I've praised all sorts of these films for being funny, and I enjoy that the MCU wants to make me laugh and tries to make me laugh. But the movie's actually written in the fashion of a comedy. And what I mean by that is that the choices made by characters and the way scenes play out only work because they're written to set up punchlines. They're written to set up jokes, but they don't make any sense if you're trying to tell a serious story. Because like you can have a movie play out and have certain one-liners happen, and you can make people joke, but it's played seriously. You can do the intro little news broadcast deal and make me laugh while informing me, but you're not having to write it as a comedy. But the movie does things like three or four different times in the movie, scenes in the movie, spy stuff is happening, costume stuff is happening, where Nick Fury's in the hotel room, Peter Parker's changing costumes, or Peter Parker's changing costumes in front of MJ, and the door's unlocked and open. And it's each of these times it's there to set up a punchline of Nick Fury keeps shooting people and people keep walking in as he's trying to deliver this dialogue. So it's like, oh, that's kind of funny. Except it it doesn't make any sense if you're trying to make a serious movie. It's like it's a joke. It's like you're doing satire because you're setting up this ridiculous scenario. But Nick Fury spy, or even Talos spy as Nick Fury, would be like, hey man, lock the door. Like, all right, Ned, we can shoot because he knows. Now lock the door. They wouldn't like keep doing it. It's like, we got to go. But they keep playing it out because we're just trying to get jokes. That's how you write a comedy. Likewise, they have a scene where Peter Parker walks into a room and he's stated in this movie to be underage. He's not 18 because he hasn't graduated high school. I don't remember if they state his age inside of the movie, but he's stated to be 16, I believe. Yeah. So he's underage, and they have a grown woman tell him to undress right off the bat. Like, okay, you're 2019. You're probably not supposed to make jokes like that because you switch it around and you have Nick Fury say to any one of the high school girls, take off your clothes, and suddenly we have a problem. But you have grown woman tell our hero to do it, and suddenly it's a punchline of a joke. Probably stop and think about that one a little bit more. But she tells him to do this as spy lady, and the door's not locked. They're not behind a bunch of doors. And you go, and it sets up this joke of like, oh, walked in, looks like he's doing a sex thing, but he's not. He's trying to put his new costume on, and she told him to take his clothes. So it's a joke. You would have locked the door. You would have gone further into the place. You wouldn't do it somewhere where you would get caught. That's comedy writing. It's not serious movie writing. And so if you're trying to make a serious movie where you're trying to take this universe in a manner that's like, okay, fantastic things happen, but there's rules inside of it. You can't have spies being morons. And then later in the film, you have Peter changing in front of MJ. The door's wide open. Ned walks in and he's like, oh, your change. And he's literally talking loudly as like the door's open. It's just kind of one of those ones that stuff like that. Like you can't do cheap jokes like that if you want me to also take the world seriously. It's like, oh, I just don't want to. I want to live up to the legacy, and you're trying to do this big heavy stuff about the world and who's going to lead, and satire, comedy type jokes inside of it that just really frustrating the way they handled a bunch of things like that, and the kind of the very large portion of the movie plays out like this of scenarios only happen because they're trying to get a punchline. It doesn't make any sense in any sort of serious way. Second big issue I had with it was the glasses plot line, where it's second time in a row, Tony Stark trusts teenager kid with really dangerous technology that the kid misuses. This time far worse. It's this major plot line inside of the movie that Tony trusts him with these glasses that are connected to a defense network that can kill people with no instructions, no kind of like pep talk, nothing like that. And so the first thing he does with them is try and kill his friends, blow up the bus, which once again, this feels like comedy writing. They need to do a sequence right here to kind of establish the drones. Like when it happened in the movie, it's like, what do they do? Like drones? Where's this going? Okay, they're setting up the ideas of drones. And so that needed to happen in that little bit. But they wanted to make this big scenario and then a little bit of an action sequence out of it. So like, what if it's funny that he accidentally tries to kill one of the people? And so then like, he's like, hey, look, a goat over there. And then jumps up. Like that's the worst scene in the movie. The bus ride kill the guy sequence. It just does not work. Like it's a ridiculous thing that feels out of place and too dumb. And once again, strains credibility because it's such an obscene or such a poor use of the technology and such an example of why he's not ready and shouldn't have it that it undermines what they try and do later in the movie few scenes later than this, he drops the glasses on the floor and they have to be picked up and handed to him. And he's like, oh, what do I do? And maybe there's a deleted scene. Maybe there's some implication there that there was a pickpocket. If there was something like that, that would help me understand it. Like if there's a clarification or some rationale that they actually stole the glasses from him to be like, put that little tick in his mind of like, wow, I almost lost the glasses because I dropped them. Like if there's something like that in the film, it would go, okay, that adds to it. But if he just literally dropped the glasses on the floor, and then gives them to a guy that he met the day before. I mean, of course he shouldn't have this technology. And there's just the simple fact of the matter of why wouldn't Tony give it to Happy? Why wouldn't he give it to Pepper? Why would he give it to a kid without instructions? That's really weird. That doesn't make any sense. And then later in the movie, they even try and make it like a heartfelt moment where Happy kind of goes, you know, he second guessed everything about him, but the one thing he never second guessed was giving this to you. What? Why would... Are you trying to give this as another example of Tony's failures and how he was out of control? Because he obviously should have second guessed this one because he's a kid that behaves like a teenager. It's one of the endearing quirks about him is that he's not mature enough for a lot of this stuff, but he's a good guy. But he's not ready for this. He does not have the actual long-term forethought and maturity and experience to handle this stuff. And so, but he was given, and so the movie is him having the adventure that helps him mature enough to handle some of this stuff. But he was given it to it before he had that. Hence why he gave it to the wrong person. Hence why he tried to kill a coworker, and hence why he might have dropped his glasses on the ground. That really hurts the movie for me when it's so pivotal to the film. This technology that I'm like, what? He shouldn't have it. There's not other than the movie needs to exist, and it makes for a nice Mysterio plot line. But the way it kind of plays out in the movie, I have a lot of problems with it. So, as I said before, to kind of go more into summary type category and all this one, it's a very fun movie. It's very enjoyable. There's some big issues in it for me with Mysterio's motivation, that it's written like a comedy, and this technology that makes me kind of go, as much fun as I have with it, as rewatchable it is, it's just not top tier Marvel for me. I love the MCU, so being a middle of the road MCU film means you're still a movie that I really enjoyed, that I had a great time with. But for me, there's a lot of MCU films that are quite a bit better than this one, that balance the tone, the laughs, the drama better than this one does, and don't have plot points that just pull me out of it. They're movies about people with superpowers and time travel and all kinds of stuff that's crazy. But it needs to feel internally consistent and not just nonsense. And so when you have an actual adult trusting an actual teenager with weapons that are of mass destruction, that's not fantasy anymore. We're doing real type things that have real world connections, and that's where there needs to be more logics to ground everything and not be stupid. And this felt stupid to me in the way it was handled. So we're clear. Very enjoyable film. Certainly recommend it. I'm going to see it a third time in just a couple of days. It's just not top tier MCU for me. I've been actually pretty confused by the number of people that, when they came out of the theater, thought like this is the best Spider-Man movie. I know some people said it's the best MCU film. I just don't understand where you're coming from on that. I don't even know that it even aspires to those types of things. So it's a film that's getting interesting reactions, and I don't know if it's because it's some of the things it does so well that and there's a little uniqueness to it that for some people it just pops right out of the gate a little bit more. But I'm interested to see how people respond to my rankings over the next couple of days and see where other people are ranking, because I just don't know, because such strong positive praise from some people, which I just didn't understand it. But so there you have it. There's my spoiler-filled take on it. Everything that I could remember to talk about the movie, I talked about it here. And I don't know what this is, like 40 minutes of me talking about the movie. So hopefully I covered everything you want to hear about. Remember to check out that video right over there about the 8 canceled Spider-Man movies. I spent a ton of time on it. I hope you love it. I love that kind of thing. I had a ton of fun making it. I hope you have a ton of fun watching it. Thank you for watching, and keep talking movies too much.